I just want to kind of start from the beginning. I know you've put this out there before, but pretend like I haven't read it at all. Where are you from?
Raised in Freeport, Florida. Grandfather, daddy were born and raised there. Family came into this neck of the woods before statehood. I think there's a total, from start to finish, 7 generations. So grew up there, went to high school, played ball, all this gamut of sports. And,
right.
Got married.
How big was the high school back then?
Freeport High School then was K to 12. We might have had 400 people from top to bottom.
Did you play football?
Yeah, played football, basketball, track. Made a couple trips state in a couple events, some district championships. So all about sports. And
back then, did you have to play both ways, or?
Yes, I literally. The seasons were a little bit different scheduled then. I actually had a couple weeks there where I was going from finishing up one sports and going that night to practice for the other sports.
Right.
So, and we were a small school, 1A school, which is the smallest. Travel all over the country, just playing teams here and there. But
what position did you play in football?
I was a middle linebacker and a fullback. Mm-hmm. I was basically a fullback just because I had some size.
Right.
I very seldom run the ball. I was just a blocking fullback. But I was actually was honored to be defensive lineman of the year, 2 years back to back, and my senior year, most valuable player. Led in track 4 years. Went to state championships in my event 2 years back to back in that. Basketball, pretty, kind of middle of the road basketball.
Just well-rounded, huh?
Yeah, well, that's all we had back then.
Right.
I go back to when Freeport was, the main road was a 2-lane road, 331. There wasn't even a red light when I graduated school. So that's how far back it goes and how small we were. But came out of high school, got married pretty young. Tried a couple of things. Worked for Coca-Cola for a little bit as retail sales. Worked in the forestry industry for just a little while. Spent most of the next about 8-9 years. I was a merchant mariner. My dad was a tugboat captain. Had been from before I was born till he died. Did that up to about 89. Decided to come on back home. I went to put myself through the police academy. Was fortunate enough to get hired, the sheriff's name, who was Quinn McMillan, and
Here in Walton County?
Here in Walton County, and stayed 25 years doing different jobs. I retired as an investigator, but I school resource wore a lot of hats in that 25 years. Again, we were small,
sure.
So
everybody had to do a little bit of something.
Yeah, I was SWAT team. I was a tactical flight officer. I was also during that 30-year reign. I was also a volunteer fireman with the Freeport Fire Department when it was a city department.
Yeah.
And actually, when I left there before it went to the county, I was one of the lieutenants when I left as a firefighter. Literally, back in them days, toted the bunker gear in the truck of my car. I've actually rolled up on a squad car and gear up and go fight fires.
Right.
Did all the community service things, coached Pee Wee football, had kids my son come up through it. But anyway, got married. We'll have our 41st anniversary this September.
Wow.
And have one son.
Congratulations. That's
a
a feat.
One son. He is now 38. Grew up here also. He graduated. Went to local college for a couple of years. Came out and went in the Army.
Good for him.
Did a couple of tours with the 101st Airborne. Decided to come home. That wasn't what he wanted to do for a career.
Sure.
He's been a deputy sheriff with Walton County now for about 12 years. And he has spent the bulk of that as a school resource officer.
I see.
And he also writes sports for the Puniac Herald.
Okay. So as a law enforcement person your entire life, more or less,
as far as adult life,
sure,
correct.
What do you think about what's going on right now? With the law enforcement nationwide.
Nationwide, some mistakes have been made. Some people have made some mistakes. I would just ask people to kind of not throw everybody in the same bag.
Yeah.
I think there's not a profession out there that one or two slip through the cracks. They don't need to be there.
Do you think that the phrase law enforcement reform, do you think that there is a reform measure needed with respect to law enforcement?
I think to a degree, yes. I think there's some training in the basic academies that needs to be shifted a little bit compared to what I went through. The training, the one area I like to see change, the message kind of across in law enforcement is, it's not there's kind of a division, but it's not like like racial far as color stuff. There's pretty much, you're drilled in, there's us and then everybody else.
Right.
And I think sometimes we lose that, and what you do, it's all about survival. All the training is about you surviving, you going home. And part of that training is, we used to say this when I was young, and it was pretty much a motto: in God we trust, all others are suspect. Mm-hmm. So when you got these officers now in these times going out there with the mindset that everybody's the enemy, and you get into these contacts with people, you're already leaning to the side of this something bad might happen.
Yeah. And
then you take a couple of incidents that just minute incidents that just push that scale over. Sometimes our officers overreact. So I think I'd like to see more situation awareness type training.
Yeah.
In other words, and I understand the concept is, look, get out of the car, be ramped up to here, and then once you see what you got, come down. But when you get out of the car and you're ramped up to here already,
right,
it doesn't take, and especially with a lot of civilians who don't understand the world we live in, it don't take but just one or two misinterpreted intentions
to escalate,
and it goes out of hand.
Do you think police officers should be paid more? Do you think there's a pay situation?
Yes. Not being prejudiced here, I don't, not just police officers, I don't think our school teachers make enough money, all these folks that do these type of jobs. But to answer your question, yes, I believe officers deserve more money. Right. One thing is, it's gotten more technical, there's more requirements. The academy itself is almost the equivalent of a 2-year degree.
Are the deputy sheriff, are they required to meet physical fitness standards?
That is dependent on the department. Now, with Walton County, yes, we ran a physical test every 2 years, involved running and different.
I'm sure it's not real high, but I mean, it's got.
No, it's got some basic stuff. Of course, it's not as stringent as maybe a firefighter goes through, which they do a lot of a lot more heavy lifting stuff. But yes, I think there needs to be a standard to some degree. My theory is, if we're partners, and I'm dealing with a situation, if you can't handle yourself, you're just a burden to me. You're just splitting my attention away. You got to be able to handle yourself,
10-4.
So
I might glance over here just at some notes.
Sure.
Let's talk about development in Walton County.
All right.
What does overdevelopment look like?
To me, again, coming from as being an elected official from a city that's growing, and again, this is my perspective and my understanding of things. Right now, for me, development is when it's overwhelming your infrastructure. If you're asking me, is there a limit to growth? I think that actually depends on the area and how much room you've got to grow. Are we full yet where there's nothing else can be built? Because I don't think we are. I think we're close.
Right.
But as far as my judge, when I look at things, overdevelopment to me is when you don't have the infrastructure to.
Do you think that we have a sound infrastructure for
Negative.
our current capacity?
Negative.
So we would be, and we're talking about South Walton, obviously.
Well, if you want to just narrow it down, I think across the county, there's infrastructure that needs to be done for sure. But since we're talking about South Walton, I think South Walton is woefully behind in infrastructure. Again, this is not to put blame on anybody or any particular thing, but it's just to drive over here gives you an example.
Right.
And when we talk about infrastructure too, let me just define what it means to me. Okay.
Please.
Infrastructure to me means, do you have the road capacity to handle traffic? Do you have the water capacity? Do you have the sewer capacity to deal with the situation? Do you have enough classrooms? Do you have enough teachers? Do you have enough firefighters? Do you have enough hospital beds? Do you have enough police officers? So when you talk to me about infrastructure, that's just so you can understand.
It sounds like what you're saying is we're overdeveloped.
In relationship to our infrastructure, yes, yes.
If you were elected, what do you think you will do to push that forward so that that's not the case? You know, more infrastructure or less impact from, I don't know how less impact happens, but.
Be mindful when I make these statements. I'm making them from the 30,000 foot height, from way up here.
Talk briefly though before we get on to development. You've served on some some bodies before.
Correct.
What other than being in the sheriff's department?
I have served at the city level as on a planning board. I did a term as that.
That's at Freeport.
In Freeport, which is one of the 3 incorporated cities in Walton County. And when I retired in 2015 from full-time service, I stayed on doing some part-time work. 2016, I ran for city council and was elected, and I was into my 3rd year of my term when this came up to run about county commissioner, which due to state election laws, I had to resign. So
you've had hands-on with planning and zoning and
correct.
All these different facets of development.
Correct. Not near to the volume as on the county level, and on some issues not near as complicated. But yes, I do have some experience when it comes to comp plans and zoning laws and stuff. Having to, just like on the county commissioners, the city council has to pass everything. So that put me into studying issues across the board. But yeah, there's impacts. There's, again, your comp plans, your all this stuff. So
in relation to development and infrastructure, and the idea that maybe we're overdeveloped relative to our current infrastructure, what do you see as a solution to solving that problem in the next 10 years? Or, I'm not even sure that would be enough time.
Here's my thoughts about what I'm planning to do is I don't think we're at a point to stop development, but I do believe maybe it might be time to pump the brakes just a little bit.
How do you do that?
Well, first of all, you got to get a strategic plan. One thing that I haven't seen over county-wise, not just here, but county-wise, what is the plan? So I think it first thing is, all right, sit down and where are we at and where we want to go. I don't see that. And it could be out there and I've just missed it, but I just don't see a long range plan. So I think that's the first step, just like any business, take a true inventory of where you're at and where do you want to go. I think that's the first thing. Then couple that with a very, very aggressive infrastructure work. Again, and that, not to say any of this is easy, and it's a huge job. I do not underestimate how big of a job it is, but from experience from the county, with the city, we were the same way. We were a small town that blew up overnight. So we had to get very aggressive and very creative about funding and get a goal, get a plan, to make sure we're spending the money in the right spots, we're not wasting it. We went aggressively after grants. There's multiple types of grants, so you got to kind of think outside the box. And I'll give you an example of what we accomplished in Freeport. One of the examples, by listening to people, reaching out to different people in different expert fields, we were able to fund a $14 million sewer plant. We went through USDA, which received half the cost, came up with a finance option at some really low interest to finance the rest of it. And with the customer base, when we looked at the customer base, that more than covers the loan side of it through the customer base. Plus, we're adding more customers, and we didn't have to raise the ad valorem tax. We didn't have to raise our service fees for our water and sewer. So again, but it took somebody thinking outside the box. Well, let's look around. Let's see what helps out there. So that would be one thing I do, is identify the problems and put some teams together and let's see what kind of funding or appropriations are out there.
Just off the top of your head, and we're sitting here talking, roads, classrooms, teachers, infrastructure. What do you think's the most important sector of infrastructure to
I think
focus on?
I have two chains of thoughts on that. There's the actual natural order of importance, but as a county commissioner, there's other entities on some of these other infrastructure. They're the responsibility of some other government entities. Take like classroom stuff. That falls under the school board.
Right.
County has absolutely no dog in that fight.
Right.
But I would put schools top.
Right.
But for as a county commissioner, I think the number one priority here would be the roads, and then your water and sewer.
So you would advocate for adding roads?
Correct. Advocating roads, the addition of roads,
In your
improvement of roads.
Have you got any areas that you think could cut through north and south?
I have some
anywhere?
ideas. I have some ideas, again, that I think are plausible. If you were to dissect it, would it actually be applicable? I don't know, but just, again, from 30,000 foot.
Sure.
I think the biggest, when it comes to traffic in South Walton, the biggest setback is Highway 98. Because everything funnels to that. It doesn't matter how many north and south arteries you have or how many lanes you got coming to it. If the main pipeline, i.e. 98, can't handle the capacity. So first thing is 98. What are some ideas of 98? 98's under state control, not the county. I know even in Freeport, for me to just to try to put a stoplight up or a safety device up, it takes a year and a half just dealing with DOT to get them on board. But what we can do, though, is use our, let me see how I can word this, use our influence to push. And here's how the ball bounces. Our government officials get out of the office, start hitting up all these congressmen, citizens. Let's hit up our state representatives, because let's face it, they're the ones that control the purse strings to DOT. So we put pressure, and we knock on doors, and we network, and we build these relationships with our state representatives, who in turn go to Tallahassee, since DOT is a state agency, and bat for us. That's how you get things done with DOT. I'm not saying that hasn't been done. I do not know. You asked me what I would attempt,
Right.
know. And I'm not here to knock anybody else's work. That's just me. I know Senator Gaynor. We've worked on projects before. I know Brad Drake, and I know Matt Gates, from issues, contacts. I'm willing to leverage that for the county, these relationships. Politics is about networking. I don't know what everybody else calls it, but I call it networking.
Right.
You got to know people to get things done.
And speaking of politics, do you think that Walton County, it seems to be an aura of Walton County that it's the good old boy network, that it's a corrupt government. Do you believe there's corruption within Walton County?
I don't. I think there's been multiple times that decisions were made that probably wasn't the right ones to make, but at the time they made them, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. That was the best they knew to do with it. Of course, hindsight's always 20/20. I've seen decisions made where as a citizen, I've scratched my head and go, but do I think it was for any type of criminal intent, motive? No. I think mistakes have been made. I think some mistakes have been recognized, and instead of addressing them, they just kind of don't address them, which is the opposite of me. I'm not scared to make a decision. And if I make a mistake, my theory is we'll go back and readdress it. And I think maybe that's part of the breakdown, is trying to put your ego away and admit, I screwed up.
Right.
Let's see what we can do to fix this. But far as just ride out, pay off construction, no. And I say that too because, especially in this day and a time where everything is so, media and there's just so many eyes on everything now. I would believe you would have federal and state agencies knocking at your door with search warrants.
You know, campaign contributions have been made a topic of conversation on social media around the campaign. Where have your campaign contributions come from?
My campaign has just came from families and friends. A couple of them are business owners, but but I haven't taken any money from anything from out of state. Again, I have, like all of us, we have our friends that want to support us and family. So, and of course my own money. I'm not comfortable with out-of-state money. Being in politics, what little bit I had, there always seems to be some exceptions, some strings tied to that money. And I just want it to go in.
It's okay.
We're going to edit this.
Yeah.
I need to turn this off. Let me see if I can. Put this on.
No worries.
All right, well, I think we're going to.
Good.
Yeah. I forgot.
So
But I want to.
let's just start from a point.
Okay.
Let's talk quickly about campaign contributions. Your campaign contributions have not come from out of state. They're mostly friends and family.
Correct.
Teddy Stewart was here earlier. He has accepted campaign contributions from a South Florida large family developer down there. Of course, he says that doesn't mean anything. Why would a South Florida family developer want to make a contribution in Walton County?
I mean, I can make an assumption. Do I know what's in their heart? By no means, and I don't profess to be. But they're business opportunities. They see some business opportunity here, obviously. Why would they want to put money in the campaigns if there was nothing in the future or something they see here they want to get into? Far as going back to, far as contributions, that played into something that I'm sincerely trying to bring to the table is one thing, whether it's justified or not, there is a disconnect between our citizens and our county leaders. There's a distrust. There's a lot of different things going on there. And I think I want to try to build that trust back up, put that confidence back in us. I want to be a county commissioner that you trust and you're proud to say is my county commissioner. Spilling into the contribution, I think if nothing else, just the optics of you taking these monies from certain, just the optics of it look bad. So I'd rather not have the money and not even give the appearance that, to help build that relationship up with the counties, if that made sense. But that's my 2 cents on contributions.
Right. I guess the topic of conversation is development. There's a strict development code. Walton County's sort of got a reputation for being, I don't want to use the word difficult, but slow and a lot of requirements, and it can take a long time to get things, which I think is good personally. I think that's a good thing that it's not so easy just to get whatever can be allowed, past the committee. You will commit, obviously, to letter of the law, the way the code reads, upholding that code, and to be very strict with variances.
Yes, most definitely. Again, coming from my background, I spent most of my adult life out there trying to get people to comply, to actually reach out there when they went colored outside lines. So it was my job to bring them back into compliance, and that's the mentality I'm moving forward with. Just like in my other career, I was not influenced by who you were or what you had. I actually have dealt with family and friends and have arrested likewise because of having to pull them back into compliance. Right. And that's the attitude I'll take on there.
Let's see, a couple of things. Beach vendors. How do you feel about beach vendors in that situation?
Today, as we speak, this is my opinion about beach vendors. With the customary use and the lack of accessibility by our visitors and even our own citizens, I don't think this and we're basically restricted down to what, approximately 4 miles of beach now.
I'm not sure,
But it's somewhere around there, with the rest of it being so-called private. So since we don't have these 20-something miles of beach to get these visitors and our locals too, and we're all restricted to just, the county only controls about 4 miles of beach. And that's something I don't think a lot of people understand. You have state beaches out there, and then you have, of course, this private. There's only rounded off 4 miles of beach the county actually controls. With that limited space right now, I don't, that's some valuable land. I mean, that
opportunity
square foot,
right.
And I don't think it needs to be covered up by vendors. You know, that's real estate that I feel we need for our visitors and our county. I'm not against vendors. They have a purpose. Right now, with customary use, I don't really see what the county has control over the vendors on the, quote, private properties and what they're allowing. But I think the county does control over the volume or whatever when it comes to vendors on our county properties. And I just don't think they need to be taking up a lot of real estate right now on the county properties. Again, we're trying to cram thousands of people on what used to be 20-something miles of beach onto 4 miles of beach now. But also, too, I think the only other issue that I've come up with vendors is, you know, just like everybody else, they need to know there needs to be an enforcement arm out there policing them and making sure they're playing by the rules.
How do you feel about golf carts, e-vehicles, and just the traffic congestion in general along the scenic corridor?
Well, two-part question there. I have my personal opinion about golf carts, and then I have my professional. My personal opinion is I don't like them on our main roads, our blacktop roads. Maybe in a subdivision where the roads are private and to get around in the neighborhoods, but actually onto our county and state roads, I don't like seeing them. I probably wouldn't have that attitude if what I saw was reasonable adults operating these, but I see way too many kids, way too many unanswered safety stuff. I've seen mamas sitting on the back of these things with their toddler in their lap. You know, let's go to the law side of it. First of all, golf carts are not, and let me make this clear, golf carts are not legal on any road. Now, what you can do is take a golf cart with modifications, and then it's classified as a low-speed vehicle. Some of the things you have to do, it has to be tagged. You have to wear your seatbelts, because once it becomes a low-speed vehicle and you put it onto a county, state, federal road right away, it is a motor vehicle. And all laws, just like driving a car, you're supposed to abide by. Now, the state of Florida does not allow them on their state roads, period. Anywhere, whether they're low-speed vehicles or not, they're not allowed. Now, it's up to the counties on their county roads on designating where they'll allow them or not. Well,
Speaking of that, would you ever support an initiative that came up with a plan to remove high-speed vehicles from...
you mean low-speed vehicles?
Well, no, high-speed. I mean, in other words, transition to a low-speed vehicle, mainly thoroughfare.
If we're talking, I would be in support of creating a thoroughfare for low-speed vehicles, but if let's just say like 38 where they're allowed right now, to do away with all the car traffic on 30-way, I don't really think it's a good idea, but I just don't think it's plausible.
Yeah.
But why not a alternative, for no better vocabulary, road-based for low-speed vehicles? At least separate them. They got their places they can travel, you know.
How do you feel about public transportation in Walton County?
I think it's a great idea. I know, if I'm not mistaken, I think the county just, and it's an infant stage, I get it, and it's not the total answer, but I think the county's kind of moving towards that to some degree, because I believe they just bought some buses, and they are actually, as we speak, shuffling people from the Phoenix to South Walton. Now, of course, they got to have means once they get here, but it's a start. But I think the county is moving towards that already. And as an individual county commissioner, I would love to explore any options for public transportation. I think it would be good. I would be very supportive of any plausible public transportation. Probably wouldn't have said this 10, 15 years ago, but now with the volume of people, and I think it's really something we need to pursue.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you. The TDC, do they do a good job? What does the TDC do for us?
I've had very little contact with TDC as far as any of my dealings. I have reached out to them a couple of times when I was with Freeport, on the council of Freeport, about some marketing ideas. In other words, I'm trying to promote Freeport.
How did that go?
Frustrating. I understood their position, but it was frustrating.
What was their position?
I don't. Well, the position is, and again, this is my understanding, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody's going to correct me. When when the city decided let's brand Freeport, let's promote Freeport. We're like everybody else. We're trying to attract businesses and people and stuff like that. I reached out to TDC about helping us marketing Freeport. Be honest with you, I walked in thinking this is a a county agency. Their job is to promote Walton County. We're part of Walton County. Come to find out, pretty much was the excuse I got was they can only spend. First of all, their money comes from the bed tax. For those that don't know, that they have to spend that money where it's collected. I said, okay. So you telling me unless we have motels or short-term rentals, the only way we can generate money for promotional is have our own TDC, which was basically what we were told to do, to create our own TDC. Of course, for me, that wasn't an answer because there's not when you get north of Bay, let's face it, there's not enough bed tax to even keep the lights on the building you'd have. Right. So it's just not financially feasible to do another TDC.
Yeah.
Now, I will counter with this, is I thought since the traffic going down there is utilizing my infrastructure, how come you couldn't? But that's the way they are. TDC is...
Is there any, I don't want to use the word recourse, but is there any pathway to changing how the TDC operates in Walton County without changing the Constitution of Florida?
My understanding that the rules that TDC are governed by strictly come out of Tallahassee. I don't think, other than creating the position and appointing the director, I think as far as the laws they work by come out of Tallahassee. So I think any changes would have to come, changing state law.
I think promoting tourism in South Walton might be the easiest job anyone's ever had. We have 5 coastal dune lakes that are, rare in the world, and probably some of the best beachfront, again, in the world. Why do we need a TDC to promote tourism when the demand for it is overflowing?
Well, I understand where you're going. I mean, everybody knows we got white sand and blue water. You don't have to promote that. But the TDC money also gives you funds to do a lot of other things. Beaches need to be kept clean. There's facilities like beach accesses and stuff like that.
Well, they could still do that. That's not promoting tourism. That's maintaining the resource.
But you have to have that promotion element to be able to draw that money. If I'm not mistaken, 40% of the money they collect has to be spent on advertising.
Right.
The other 60% can be used for other projects, and it's that other 60% that really helps us as taxpayers that live here, because they're able to build things without having to use our county tax dollars too.
Don't those improvements have to have a tourism function?
Correct. There's got to be that element of tourism.
So you couldn't build an aquatic center for the local residents out of
Good
TDC
question.
dollars?
Depends on how you present it, I would think. I do not know the answer to that. Is this something that's going to be open to tourists? Is it something that can be promoted as part of our attractions? Maybe that's an angle on that. I don't know.
I mean, I moved here 4 years ago, so my perspective is not the same as someone who's lived here for 20 years or who was born here. And I chose to come here, so I think that is a point in and of itself that's different than being born here. I chose to come here, but the sentiment I get, and I think you touched on it, where there is a distrust or a dis-ease with the government from the locals, and I think that a lot of times it's because the locals feel forgotten, from the government, from the beaches, the white sand and blue waters and the state parks and the trails and the beautiful weather, all that's natural resources, and
Correct.
I feel like the locals sort of feel like they should. It's kind of like TDC saying it has to spend the money where they collect it. Well, the local resources here where we live and the impacts from the use of that are felt by the locals.
Yeah, I somewhat concur with what you just said. I do believe the locals in South Walton do get co-mingled into that Sandestin, Topsail, Seaside, all co-mingled, and we sometimes forget. No, we have some people that live here. Not everybody lives in Sandestin. We have neighborhoods here just like everywhere else. And I think the persona sometimes is when you look across the board down here, you see the golf course, you see the pools, you see all these amenities, but what you miss is these are restricted to just people in that sub, and then you forget about the ones who are not in that environment. And I think they do forget. I had a conversation about a community pool over in the Miramar Beach area, if I would behind this. And my first thoughts were, y'all got pools, and I stopped and said, oh, wait a minute, for them that don't live in these resorts, come think about it, they ain't nothing over there.
No, barely a YMCA, is there?
Is there any green space out there? Right. And I'm sure that's not just Miramar Beach across the board. So I would say, as a county commissioner, that we got to put more focus on our local people. I do agree. I think they kind of got pushed to the back. I don't think it was intentionally anybody's plans, but I think it's time we put our citizens first a little bit. And my exact comment was, that's not too much to ask, for a pool for these citizens. Right. It's not too much to ask to say, hey, county, with all the money that's being spent in this county from whatever source, why can't we have a park? Why can't we have a pool? We're not Sandestin, we're not Topsail, we don't belong to these big seasides, I mean, let's face it, you and I could not get in the car and just go use the amenities that's anywhere else down here. So why not? So I will say this, I think the citizens, probably not intentionally, but have kind of been forgotten a little bit, and I think we need to move forward. I think the county has started in that direction a little bit. I think with the 10 acres they bought from the golf garden out there, I think that was kind of a start. I don't think that needs to be the end of it. We have bought a lot of properties for people to beach accesses, which is great, but yeah, I think it's time we kind of put the citizens of South Walton first again, or let them be the focus, because that's who we're here for. And I think we got so caught up through the years of the tourism, we took our focus off where it needed to be, and that's on the actual people that live here.
Well, House Bill 631, that's a local issue, customary use.
Yes.
That bill was drafted by a congressperson in South Florida.
South Florida.
And our state legislator here, Mr. Drake, voted for it. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe he voted for it because he felt like it was going to pass anyways. Why would a congressperson, state legislator in South Florida be drafting a bill that only affects Walton County?
That's a good question. Let me go into this. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is, are you familiar with the term home rule?
I've heard it many times, but I don't know exactly.
I'll give you the Reader's Digest. In our Constitution of the state of Florida, home rule was created to give the local entities control over what's going on in their neighborhoods. That has been eroded so much here from Tallahassee. Every time we let Tallahassee take control away from us. So first of all, I'm a home rule guy. I believe these issues should be made from the local standard, all of them. But South Florida has a lot of lobbyists, there's a lot of money from developers that go into these, different pushes, and I don't think they need to be in the business to tell us.
It feels a lot like corruption.
So here, and for that reason alone, why I think we need a lot of these issues back into local control is this, just like that incident. I don't need a bunch of junior senators or representatives from South Florida implementing stuff that might be good for them, but don't work over here. So,
do you have any opinions on how Walton County Board of County Commissioners can work together to reestablish home rule? I'm sure it involves going through the state legislature and passing laws, but
it's every time it's paying attention what's going on in Tallahassee. With City Free, I've actually been on teams that went over there when they would bring stuff up, and it sounds good to the general public, and you don't see the harm in it. But for us that watch these things, to highlight the badness in it, I think we at a county level, I think every bill that comes up in the state of Florida, just to play it safe, we should have a team over there. Making sure that there's not something connected that's going to erode our home rule. So my fix to that is take time and keep up what's going on in Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. I would like to, if power be and the time frame is that we have a contingent of people. Why can't we there's a lot of smart people in this county. Mm-hmm. Why can't we put some sort of teams together that their only job, volunteer, if they want to volunteer and be involved, is to be the watchdog for Walton County on every bill that's going to come up, and see is there something in here that's going to take our authority away from it? And because like you said a while ago, it's obvious our state reps ain't going to do it.
Well, I'm surprised that there isn't that function on the county level. It seems like that would be a paid for.
If there is one, I don't know. Now I know there's certain issues, just like the city will hire a lobbyist to push a certain project or something like that. But I know of no committees that are just a watchdog in Tallahassee. Now, we got all kind of committees here in Walton County watching us, trust me.
Right.
But how many are actually watching Tallahassee? Short-term rental. I have been beat till I'm black and blue about short-term rental, about the lack of county
control,
or county not doing this, not doing that. Right. I don't think a lot of people understand is that's somehow through the motion of things and not paying attention. Yeah. That is now strictly under the control of Tallahassee. That should be a local issue. What's a good fit for South Florida doesn't make it a good fit across the board. So home rule, I'm a big home rule supporter. And I think we need to really pay attention to what's going on in Tallahassee.
How do you see the customary use,
like a long-range forecast, or where we're at now?
Just the controversy around it right now. Who's going to win? The public, the private beachfront owners, the people supporting customary use. Is there a winner and a loser? Is there a winner and a winner?
Here's my snapshot of that, of where I'm at. Again, I'm sure if I'm wrong, I'll get some phone calls. First of all, I believe the beaches ought to be open to everyone. So right off the bat, I believe in customary use.
Well, then let's stop right there. Where is the beach?
There goes hence lies part of the problem too. Right.
But just to Boots McCormick, where do you say if you
when I was growing up on these beaches, we pretty much stayed between the dune line back because that's where the sea oaks were, and that's, you didn't want to be tearing down the dunes. So to me, the public access part of this growing up here was always between the dune line and the waters. So that would kind of be what I consider public access, because that's where we had access to. Even though that we didn't have customary use and there was lines drawn in, we as locals didn't encroach on the dunes because, you had vegetation and sea turtles and stuff like that. But if you're asking me the legal description, I don't really think there is one because it all has to do with the high mean tide, which is a line that moves. So how do you that? In a perfect world, the state of Florida would have came down here and now that we have GPS and all this stuff, shot a line, call it a setback line, call it whatever you want. From this point forward, this is public. But in a perfect world, where I think we're at today, where it's at right now, I think it is in the courts. It's going to take a court decision. I think the boat to sit down and try to work this out with each other is sailed. I think everybody has dug their heels in, and nobody's even wanting to sit down and try to find a compromise. So I think it's going to go to court. Now, my long-range projection on this issue is it's never going to stop, because it's never going to stop. And I would gear the taxpayers. I would probably heed this warning just to get ready for it. This is going to be a long, expensive battle. Because coming from a law background, I can tell you, whatever decision is made on this, somebody's going to appeal it. Then you're going to go through the process, and then it's going to get appealed. It's going to get appealed. No matter which sides win, the other side's going to, and is it ever going to end? Think about it, Yeah. And so I'd like to see, after this decision's made, I think Walton County has a good case, by the way, from the history and customary use and looking at our Constitution and going back some years with some rulings in the past. I think Walton County has a very good case for customary use. Mm-hmm. And so let's just say the county, I want to say the county wins. How about the people win, this? They're going to appeal it, just sure as I'm sitting here.
Right.
I know what I would do if I lost. And then more courts, more lawyers. I think the only thing, now from a county commissioner's level, the only thing I can contribute right now, today, where it's at, I think one thing I can contribute is making sure, basically keep a fire lit under the lawyers. Don't drag this out, let's keep it moving. Let's don't stagnate, let's just keep it moving.
Right.
So I think that's something the county commissioners can do, is just like, hey, where we at, keep it moving. Don't drag it out. Let's get a decision made so we'll know what the next battle about it is.
Real briefly, would you vote for a mask ordinance in Walton County?
No.
What would you say to the people who say that...
Not at this time, no.
What would you say to the people who today would say that strong leadership does unpopular things and the mask ordinance would save lives and we need our leaders to be strong? And
well, approaching this from a reasonable perspective is promoting masks saves lives. Not a bad thing to promote. So is promoting seatbelts. To answer that, I probably would have to just first lead into how I feel about the Constitution, to give some insight to why I answer I do. First, I think your personal health is your decision, your responsibility. All right? As a government official, I believe it is my job, or any elected official, to promote the welfare of its people, i.e., here's information, here's stuff to educate you, to arm you, so you can make the best decision for yourself, which to me that is promoting, just like promoting seatbelts, and other things. What I don't think it's the government's job to do when it comes to your health is mandate it. There's a big difference between promoting and mandating. I respect.
Seatbelts are mandated.
They are by state, correct, but you don't get arrested for it. You get a ticket, and there's an offense to it.
Well, you were about to say something. You said not at this time. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
What would need to change?
Well,
Why is it not a big? I'm not saying it's not a big deal.
Oh, it's
to
a
you,
huge deal.
But why is it not reach the precipice of where?
Well, it depends on where. It depends on your perspective, and it depends on where you get your information from. Now, again, this is from my perspective. You have to look at what's going on in your own backyard.
Okay.
Again, just like I said, I don't think some representation in South Florida says this is good for us. It needs to be statewide. Mm-hmm. We're all different. I look at the numbers in Walton County, and I'm going to give you approximate numbers because I haven't looked at the updates in a couple of days. But let's narrow it down to, my job is to make decisions for folks in Walton County. I'm not out there making decisions, New York, Miami. And they all have different situations. But here's the facts in Walton County as I interpret them. We've only had 12 deaths. All right, 9 of them came from the same facility. 1 death is too much. It's tragic. But we've had 12 deaths. At the time that I looked this last information up, we only had like 3 or 4 people in the hospital with COVID related, and none of them were ICU patients. Compared to the number, looking at that, then listen to this information. We had over 14,000 traffic crashes in Walton County last year, reported traffic crashes, resulted in over 800 injuries and 20-something deaths. So from a leader standpoint, where's your threat at? What's the threat level here? The threat level to me right now, you stand more of a chance of getting killed in a car crash than the virus. And again, 1 death is too much. So that's what I look at. I don't think the information that pertains to Walton County, what's the word I'm trying to find here? Justified or compels me to mandatory something towards your health, put you on house arrest, and take your job away.
Okay.
I will be the first one if the situation changes to revise that. But that's based off today, when you take Miami, there's 63, 64 counties in Florida. There's over 400 incorporated cities. Out of the 400 cities and 4 counties, there's only 43 government entities that have mandatory masks. Mm-hmm. When you look at their situation, what some of them I did, because I'm wondering why they have it, well, then you see, well, yeah, you got 1.2 million people crammed into on top of each other. But when you get here to Walton County, we've got some elbow room. If the numbers changes, I'll flex with it. But that, and one more thing that's brought up, I want to bring to somebody's attention too, because about this COVID, the excuse of this is going could possibly overwhelm our hospitals. Keep this in mind, folks. We've been on that razor blade every day of the year. We have less than 300 hospital beds in this county and less than 15 ICU units. We have over 70,000 people live here full time. So we're always on that edge of overwhelming.
Right.
You take a school bus for the children, God forbid, in a traffic crash.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. We live day to day under some of these threats. And I think it comes down to this, your individual threat assessment. How much risk? What's your risk? I myself, there's still circumstances. I wear my mask and stuff because I have a wife that's sick and she's way up there on So I do a lot for her. I don't want to contaminate her. I get why people feel the way they do. I respect that. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't, don't. I promote the CDC rules. Keep your distance, wear your mask in certain situations. It's a real thing. I do believe, though, it's been overplayed by a lot of people, and I think it's been underplayed by a lot of people. So with all that said, I just try to focus on what's going on in the county.
I got you. I think I know the answer to this question, but if you're elected and the height restrictions come up for a vote, how would you vote for the maintenance of the height restriction or the?
Unequivocally, no. I'll just go to add, I wish this had been across the whole county.
Right.
I don't like a lot of what I see. I feel a lot of these situations that South Walton people deal with, I'm there with them, you know. I agree with them. This beach, 90% of what's on this beach, as we speak today, was on this beach in '79 when I graduated high school. So yes, I get the changes of lifestyles, the changes of atmosphere. I get it. Trust me. This is not the beach I grew up on, and I hate it. I wish some of these rules were in existence back when I was in high school or in the 80s when I was going into the adult world. I don't know how much we can change that's already been done. I think there's damage been done, but you will see the biggest effort I got to try from this point forward. What do we do, you know, to preserve some of these lands? I will not miss an opportunity to, if it's the right situation, to preserve some of this stuff. I won't allow the encroachment on what we have.
Well, are you following the Draper Lake, D.R. Horton?
I've read it. I need sit down with some people that have some different that are some engineers and stuff to explain. First of all, for the record, I'm not an engineer.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of things, you know.
I understand they're applying for quite a few variances along with their permit.
Yeah, and that's another topic I'm kind of passionate about. That I'm going to do my part to try to curb. If you're going to give a project, say 10 variances on the rules, well, why have any rules? The rules were put there for a place, you know. And I've had this conversation, hundreds of conversations. This comes up. We need this rule and that rule, this rule. Actually, the not having rules is the problem. The problem here is just enforcement.
Right.
The enforcement arm of all of this, you know, from the code enforcement officers that watch you having glass on the beach. I think one of the biggest breakdowns in South Walton is across the board, the enforcement arm of this. We don't need no more regulation. But what we need is to build up whatever we need to get that enforcement arm out there and holding people to these rules, and quit giving people passes on them.
Do we need to hire more code enforcement officers, or what's the secret there?
One of the problems from 30,000 foot I think first of all, the group of men and women we have that are on the job are very highly, they're trained. I think they know how to do the job. I think they're just overwhelmed. And let me give you let me give you some facts. When I was a cop, started with Sheriff's Department, we were a 30-man department. Some days it was about call volume. Some days I get slammed with calls, and I know the quality of work that I put into that call on them busy days was nowhere near the higher quality if I had time. Mm-hmm. And I think right now a lot of things are falling through the crack, and it's because just the volume. So maybe more personnel is. Now something I would like to see too is this. A lot of this is complaint driven. So I'd like to see more of a proactive approach. Again, that you got to have personnel to do that. I've had people ask me, how come they drive by this and they see this but don't deal with it? I'm talking about code enforcement and this. And I said, it might be because they're so busy on just following up complaints right now. So, and I will say this, if manpower is the problem, I want to fix that. I want to fix anything to do with planning. what it takes to fix it, let's fix it, you know, if it's just volume. Because, again, just like these guys, there's so much going on. Are they actually really giving these calls, these inspections, whatever they're dealing with, the actual proper time it needs? Because they got to get in and get out. I'm sure even in your life, when you get rushed to do something, the quality's not as good. And I think because of that quality standard not being there, things get overlooked. Not intentionally, nothing criminal, no hokey, but just you just don't. It happens. Yeah. Another thing I like to see our code enforcement officers have is some authority. Just like me being a cop, I toted a weapon. You know, it was there if I needed it. Well, code enforcement, to me, their weapon is a cease and desist order. Follow up on code enforcement. I had authorities that when I went out and I saw for myself a crime, I could make an arrest. I could deal with it. I had the authority to do that. Code enforcement, when they do see an issue, the process to get a cease and desist order, I like to see them have the authority that in an incident where they're self, not just somebody calling in, but they go out and they see an infraction or what appears to be an infraction to a reasonableness, that they have the authority right then and there to issue a 48 or 72-hour cease and desist order till they can get it before the different boards or whoever says, yeah, that's a problem.
So give them a little more teeth.
Give them a little bit more teeth. Also, too, I like to see them out there on weekends. Hypothetical situation. Developer decides, sends a crew out to clean a lot on a Saturday. Let's just say there's things that's being done that don't need to be done. Well, even if you as John Q. citizen call in on the weekend, it's going to be Monday before it gets addressed, and the damage is done.
Right.
I think we need to have people out there in place that if this happens, so they can go out there and say, whoa, stop what you're doing. And then, you know, go through whatever process to get a permanent solution to it. But I just think code enforcement, if you're going, should have more authority in what they do. What is wrong with giving them the authority that upon investigation, their self, what they see, stop it right then and there.
I wasn't aware they couldn't do that.
Well,
yeah.
I don't see it,
Yeah.
and I don't. But that's my understanding how they operate. But they're good guys and gals. The quality of the personnel is not the issue. Mm-hmm. I think, like you said, I think it's the volume. I think it's the quantity of them. We spend money on everything else trying to get up there. Let's work on planning and code and all that, and get things to where they need to be. You know.
What would you say is your top 3 issues?
Looking at the county, whew, you know, the problem about answering this question is everybody's problem is the most important thing in their life, and to sit here and set priorities is hard to do, because if I say orange is priority 1, the people in the blue are going to beat me up.
Right.
But they're all equally. Every issue out there is equally important.
Okay.
I would say the first thing that needs to be addressed, the very first thing, my first 180 days in office, my plan is to first establish and rebuild that trust with the citizens. Because without that, no matter what my priorities are after that, if I don't have the support of the citizens, I ain't going to get nothing done anyway. So I think the number one thing for me is to build that up. And how do you do that? I'm going to move the current District 1 office, if I win, to a more accessible area, to Freeport. That's kind of the hub for that district anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have somebody there Monday through Friday. It's going to be manned. I'm going to be out there Monday through Friday doing something somewhere. If it's nothing but sitting in a truck and driving up and down the road looking for potholes, so I can kind of be proactive instead of reactive all the time. So the first thing is creating an atmosphere that's welcoming, that welcomes you, and we listen to what you got to say. Then is taking an inventory on this vast amount of brain power we got in this county, reaching out to different people to involve them and putting them at a table and coming up with some solutions. See, here's the thing about me. It ain't got to be my idea to be a good idea. I don't care who gets credit. If it benefits the people, that's the main goal for me. And I don't mind saying, folks, I don't know. This is more in your wheelhouse. Won't you come educate me? So that's my number one priority. Second thing is the infrastructure. Think of infrastructure as a foundation under a house. If you don't put a good foundation to start off with, it don't matter how much you put into above the ground. If that foundation can't support it, it's just going to fall. I don't care how much money you put up here. You've got to have a good foundation. I think the foundation of all this development is your infrastructure. So hitting it aggressively, identifying and trying to find some solutions to this infrastructure. Third, this has more to, I think the people, my third one would be to try to search and talk to people and get ideas about getting some diversity off this tourism. Listen, tourism's here to stay. I never see it in my lifetime. I always see it's going to be the main financial driver. But we need some diversity from that.
Do you have any thoughts on what industry might come here? What kind of industry we would appeal to?
Pie in the sky, sure. You know, your big tech companies, you know, and stuff like that. But before we even get to that point, we got some other issues going back to infrastructure. It's housing, workforce housing. I've dealt with some business people that's came to Freeport, basically just snoop around and see what's going on, and I've talked to them and give them the kind of nickel tour. And here's some of the input I get. One of the first things they look at is, first, is there a workforce? Because if you don't have a workforce, there's no sense in them coming here. Well, to have the workforce, you got to have affordable housing. You know, you got to have these neighborhoods that have a price range for the more middle, you know. This county is prominent blue-collar people, middle-income people. There's all kind of opportunities if you have a lot of money, and there's opportunities for the subsidized housing here. But a lot of our middle-class workers, you know, you take a family, a couple, maybe one works at the sheriff's department, one's a teacher. They got a pretty good income. It puts them way above. They can do way better than subsidized housing, but they still can't get into 300,000, 400,000 houses. So I think we really need to come up with some incentives, find some property somewhere that's cheap, you know, the property itself, so we can get that help these developers get the cost down, work with these, come up with some incentives, look at some properties, then get some water and sewer out there, build them up, get the infrastructure, and start trying to get these developers to focus some on some of this middle housing. Right now, they're all focused on the big dollar stuff. And it's big dollar because the property down here is ridiculous. It's ridiculous inside the city limits of Freeport. But we have a lot of tracts and lands outside. But again, you got to get this water, you got to get this infrastructure, and you got to get incentives to get these developers to want to do this and get things to where they can build this stuff where there's a profit margin in it. So I would say workforce housing would probably be the next thing. That's by no means saying there's not a lot of other things. Some other issues in this county we got to address. I don't know if people are aware, 14% of the adults in this county don't have high school educations. What about an aggressive? I'd like to see some sort of aggressive approach to some trade school. Not everybody's college material. I get it. Some people want to be welders and truck drivers and stuff like that. Why can't we start working with, you know, trade schools, you know, working with school boards? We actually have people in this, we actually have children in this county that go hungry at night. We got to get some community outreach. Sometimes we got to get out from these four walls we all live in and get out there. Now, I see it being a cop and being out here, but folks, we got to get people encouraged to get out of their four walls, and let's help our neighbors out. We've got to keep our waters clean. We've got to get septic tanks off the ground, out of these grounds. I think one of the number one contributors to our bay and local waters contamination is these septic tanks. I wish I had a magic wand. If I did, there wouldn't be a septic tank in the ground anywhere in Florida. Remember, we live on one of the largest freshwater aquifers in the state.
Right.
So there's environmental needs. Again, the list I'm not naive to the problems. I don't need to be schooled a lot on what the problems are. What I need, citizens, is help me figure out some solutions. if I'll open the door, I'll give you the opportunity to help me figure these out. So.
I like that. Is there anything else? We're at 70 minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the people out
Oh,
there?
good Lord. I've done so much talking here these last couple of months, and like all the other candidates, we're running on fumes. I have talked and questions and stuff. I guess what I would probably try to, in my race, focusing back on District 1, is to recognize that I don't profess to be an expert at everything that this county is facing. But because of my city experience, I get to bring some government experience to the table that the other two don't have, which I think puts me in a position to be able to hit the ground a little bit faster. Through trial and error and mistakes I made at the city level, I've learned some lessons that I won't have to relearn like they will, So for District 1, I would like people to recognize that, I'm dedicated to the folks. This is my home. I got grandkids here. I want the best for them. And I would appreciate at least the consideration of their vote.
Yes, sir. Well, I hope they give it to you.
Yeah. Fill out your census. People need to understand when it comes to appropriations, how big of a piece of pie you get depends on your population. So the bigger that piece of pie, the more money we get access to
Very
take care of
important.
some of these. And the other thing is, some of these races are going to be decided in the primary. I know even some of my own family, they usually wait till November till the dust settles and the last two standing, then they make a decision. That's not the situation with my race, and I think there's a couple other races. They're going to be decided in the primary.
On the 18th.
So if you're waiting till November, you won't get the voting for certain things. So come on out and vote.
Amen. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time.
No problem.
Thank you, Boots.
You're welcome.